Hello, everybody. Okay, this is a really important yet not very long broadcast. Now, what did I say about April? It was in my book. I said April is the time when we're going to start seeing financial collapse, banking collapse, like major stuff going on with the currency and banking markets, and it has already started. So, that's the big thing at the moment. They are pulling the plug. That is the news. They're pulling the plug. All this nonsense, oh, we have to raise interest rates because inflation is going up. Nonsense. This is a classic tactic of pump and dump. Why is inflation going up? Because of COVID, lockdown, free furlough money, people not working, lack of productivity, people being paid to stay at home, massive amounts of money printing. They act like they didn't know this was going to happen. They absolutely knew it was going to happen. They knew it was planned, and they knew after decades of very low interest rates, or a decade of very low interest rates, as soon as they put them up, because of this, inflation, banks are going to start to collapse. What else causes inflation? Mass immigration, freebies, handouts to migrants, again, free money, money to Ukraine. What also is causing inflation? The communist plan for net zero, which is a 5-year technocratic communist plan. It's got nothing to do with the free market or grassroots demand. This is all communism. Net zero is causing inflation because prices of energy are rising to artificial levels because they are shutting off cheap and reliable gas and electricity by blowing up infrastructure and through the wall. It's nothing to do with, inflation because demand, the economy is overheating. Nothing to do with that. It's because they are restructuring the economy for this green communist economy of scarcity, poverty, lack of freedom, lack of choice, and lack of democracy. So all this absolute nonsense. Now, it's all planned. They're pumping and dumping. They're pulling the plug. Now, why did this SVB fail? Lots of things to say on it, but first thing, they held a lot of long-term debt. As soon as interest rates went up, value of the long-term debt and the bonds, long-term bonds, drops. So when they need to sell the bonds to improve their liquidity, then you have them selling at massive losses. Now, because the interest rates have gone up again, as Janet Yellen has, they're going to go up in the UK or have gone up in the UK, bringing the price down of long-term bonds, which means that in America, there are 1.7 trillion now of unrealized losses within the banking sector, right? And these losses were nearly equal to banks' total equity of 2.1 trillion. So this interest rates going up, and if they go up any more, are wiping out the banks. There are almost 200 US banks about to go, and Deutsche Bank is in real strife, as we will soon see now this Friday, as this goes out. This is Friday, the 24th of March, 2023. Deutsche Bank and First Republic in America, a lot more banks look on their last legs. And there's a guy called, is it Michael Cohen, someone? He's a commentator over in the US, and apparently every time he says everything's fine, it goes to hell. And he said JP Morgan is solid as anything, so I'd watch JP Morgan. Let's look at my Twitter, because I am following some interesting accounts, which are really good on the economy, which is a much not covered thing in the alternative media now. US regional banks. So what they want to do with this whole banking crisis is crash all the smaller banks, all the regional banks in America. So there'll be only like maybe 5 or 6 really big banks, BlackRock, HSBC, blah, blah, blah. And those banks will work with the central banks to bring in the digital central bank currency, right? So this is to clear the deck and to make sure we're all tied to very few banks. By the way, not BlackRock of Larry Fink, Blackstone, Stephen Schwarzman, defaulted on the bonds they were holding in the Finnish market. They held a lot of property in the Nordic, had sort of a Nordic property thing going on. Property prices went down because interest rates went up, so they just defaulted. So where did that money go? And with SPV Bank as well, Janet Yellen said they would insure all the depositors. So all the depositors, and 95% of their depositors had more than $250,000, which was the previously insured limit for America, $250,000. But 95% or more of the account holders had more money than that in there, and they covered all those bank balances, right? Which was a lucky day for all the holders, mainly tech companies, mainly based in Israel. It were all paid out. But now the fund with which to replenish bank holders should banks collapse is almost empty. Isn't that handy? So the US regional bank stocks hit another new low. That's today, with First Republic Bank down 91% this year. 91% in just 1 year. That's going the same way as Credit Suisse. And this comes after Treasury Secretary Yellen said the US is no longer considering insuring all deposits. Because there's nothing in the fund, because they insured the SVB bank to the total of their deposits, right? Not just to the $250,000 limit. Yellen's comments will prove to be the biggest mistake of this crisis. Because that's going to cause a bank run. See how this is all planned? Because people take their money out if they can know it's not insured. It says futures tumble, treasuries and rate cut odds soar amid panic that Deutsche Bank is the next to go. I'd say it will be. It's been on its last legs forever. How that's... okay, that's like more of a funny... Okay, the FDIC, that's the fund that insures the bank loans. It's a bank deposits, right? Not loans, bank deposits. It's already blown through most of its 128 billion reserve, right? Okay. So the government will shut down over the debt ceiling right when the banking crisis hits, critically delaying any emergency response. Handy, isn't it? This afternoon, Janet Yellen had to convene what is literally a financial crisis. So she went into a meeting at about 3 o'clock our time, UK. It says here, ouch, Deutsche Bank's credit default swaps, which represent insurance of its bondholders against a potential default, spike as banking doom and gloom is back in Europe. Markets price 31% default probability for Deutsche Bank sub-bonds and 16% for Deutsche Bank paper. So Deutsche Bank in major trouble. Yeah, there's Georgia Maloney, who's all for digital currency and Ukraine. True colours, but I said it here when she came in, she's no good. There was more here about Deutsche Bank, now down 12% as credit default swaps hit a 4-year high. A Deutsche Bank board member said the collapse of Credit Suisse is no indication of the state of European banks. Ha ha ha, we'll see. We'll see about that. So you can see everything is really hitting the fan. This was interesting. There'll be a £20,000 cap on digital currency in the UK. Someone says here the thin end of a very nasty wedge. Yeah, I haven't analysed that yet, but I'll leave that with you. Interesting, isn't it? There was more about Yellen convening this meeting with top regulators. There's a list here of how banks have always collapsed on a Friday. It goes through Bear Stearns and Lehman Brothers was on a Friday, Washington Mutual, SVB was on a Friday, Signature Bank, Credit Suisse as well, and then it talks about what was going on with Deutsche Bank. So Deutsche Bank could collapse this weekend. So there you go, guys. We said it was all on like Donkey Kong in April, and it definitely seems like this is the way it's going. So, Biden says our banking system is safe. Yeah, he'd know, right? I noticed in the UK they said it was safe and sound. The banking system was safe and sound. Is that like an economics term or a Beatrix Potter term? Hard to know these days. Sorry, my French looks horrible. So what I wanted to end off with, we're having these riots and strikes and protests in France. I think this is nothing to take notice of. It's all the usual suspects. And we know this is suspect because it was in the British papers in relation to King Charles not being able to go over there for some sort of state hobnobbing, right? Where were all these protesters when the French citizens were locked down to the degree that they could not leave without getting paperwork and carrying documents and filing something online and were only allowed to leave? They had a very strict lockdown in France, very tight regime mandating these things for lots of sectors. And we did not see these protests. We see these protests now because the retirement age is going up. That really affects people who are employed by government and who are employed. It's not the self-employed people who are generally the pushbackers. I think these are the usual suspects. They're communists, provocateurs, people backed by Soros. Undoubtedly, they are genuine people, maybe 10 to 15% mixed in. But I'm sorry, these people aren't moving the dial. Burning wheelie bins and kind of doing this sort of stuff won't move the dial. So I urge everyone to just be a little bit skeptical of these protests and ask, cui bono? Are they trying to stir up protests in the UK by reporting on it? Are they trying to stir up protests in America by arresting Donald Trump? This is what we should be asking rather than thinking, yay, someone's doing something. Have a good evening.